Um, you're very welcome, Marlene McCormack and Emily Cassidy, both from Dublin City University. Marlene is a lecturer at the college, and then Emily is a student. So I'm just going to jump straight into our interview for Recruitment Week with Roscommon County Childcare Committee. So Marlene, I'm going to start with you. Can you give me a quick overview of your experience in the early learning and care sector, and what, in your opinion, has been the biggest milestone in the provision of the early learning and care sector during this time?
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Anya, and thanks for the opportunity. Always delighted to chat with people who are interested in the same topics. So myself, I started out many years ago in my own home-based preschool. Actually, I wouldn't be allowed now. I started off with a 10-week IPPA course, and I'm sure many of your listeners or visitors to the website won't actually remember IPPA, but it goes back a long, long way. So I started off there, and then I suppose I got heavily involved in the community end of things here in Dublin, particularly in Tala, and I was involved in setting up a full daycare service in Tala way, way back. And I was there in different roles as a manager and indeed as a board of directors. And then as I went on, I worked with IPPA and indeed for many, many years with Early Childhood Ireland, always kind of developing my own skills along the way. And really then with Early Childhood Ireland got heavily involved in the whole area of the degree in Maynooth, the part-time degree. And I got involved in that primarily because I felt it was really unfair that many of the young women and men, but mainly young women, coming into the sector had an opportunity to go from school and get a degree, while lots of women out there working for many years couldn't actually take that time out to study, and therefore a part-time degree was something that would help them. And so I was involved with Maynooth, and then went from Maynooth right into DCU in 2015 with the new degree that Emily is completing now. And so yeah, I've seen my own sort of skills, my own interests develop, but always I'd say, and it's terrible to say this, over about 30 years maybe, always in the whole area of early childhood. And it's kind of always a privilege because the people I meet that are connected with early childhood are like no other in so many ways. But back to the question you asked me, Anya, around, so what were the milestones? Well, I was thinking about this question, and there's two I'd pick out, right? Again, people may not remember these things, but the first one I picked out was the Early Years Forum in 1998. What happened then was there was an education forum conducted. It was delivered, it happened in Dublin Castle. It was a big event from an education point of view. And for the first time ever, early childhood was brought into the fold. We were all invited to go and make presentations on how we saw early childhood education and care fitting in with the national agenda. And that for me changed everything, because from there we got, again, people may not remember CECDE, we got Shielta, we got Ashter. So what we saw was early childhood developing from a policy perspective with education. So to me, that was hugely important. It wasn't just about minding or caring, although caring is hugely important, but the education element was hugely important. So that was one thing. The second thing I think that for me really stood out was the introduction of the free preschool year in 2010. That was the first one. And I think that did, when we look back on it historically, we'll say that one event, Brian Lenihan introducing the free preschool year, did for early education what Donica O'Malley did in introducing free secondary education way back in '63. So I think those are two phenomenal milestones, Anya, in terms of early childhood. There's loads and loads others, but I think they're, for me, the key ones because they make a policy difference. And if we make a difference at policy, eventually that filters down to the ground. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah. Okay, so what advice would you give to someone thinking of pursuing a career in the early learning and care setting?
I tell you what I would say to them. I would say get your qualifications early.
Yeah.
I think get your qualifications because that is the way forward. That is the way, whatever positive changes will come down the line for early childhood. I do think the graduates will be the ones that will benefit first from that. Also, I think for people to remember that once you get that piece of paper, once you graduate, and whether it's a level, indeed for any level 5, 6, 7, or 8, what I think you have to realise in early childhood is that's the starting point. The piece of paper is a starting point. You need the experience, you need continual CPD, you need to sort of, I suppose, move beyond the piece of paper and recognise that you have to keep on learning. So look at me, I'm still learning. All these years involved in early childhood, because it's a fantastic area and you never know it all.
That's it. Perfect. Okay, so what are the benefits of, it's kind of moving on from this question, what would be the benefits of having a graduate-led workforce working in services?
Well, I know from our graduates even going out into the sector that the managers tell me that they make a huge difference. And this is not in any shape or form to be disrespectful to level 5s and level 6s, because actually that's where I started. I started delivering level 5 and level 6s, and I see the work that goes into it. And equally, there are people out there in the sector who have vast experience that you could never learn from a book. But the graduate does make a difference, because the graduate comes in with up-to-date, cutting-edge knowledge and new ideas. And so the graduate is well placed, I think, not only to lead in terms of curriculum and pedagogy, but to shake things up. And we all need to be shaken up every now and again. We need to hear somebody bring in a new idea and say, oh, I never thought about that, or I never thought about it in that way, or we always did this, but I never really understood maybe why we did it. So I think the graduate, working in connection, working closely with those other staff members that are there, can bring a wealth of knowledge. So the graduate new to the sector might not bring great experience. That's what he or she is going to develop in situ. But what the graduate will bring is current thinking and knowledge that can be generously shared with others on the team.
Perfect. Brilliant.
That makes sense? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I suppose this is a plug for DCU. How can the courses at DCU support and benefit early learning and care professionals?
Well, I tell you, I'll do a shameless plug now, Owen, now that you've asked. Well, firstly to say, we've always enjoyed some students, not too many, but a few from Roscommon from year 1. And I still follow one or two of those students who are making the mark on the world, you know. So in DCU, we have our full-time BECE program, the Bachelor of Early Childhood Education program. And that's the 4-year program that Emily has just completed. And typically that's really, I suppose, mainly geared towards school leavers, but we do keep places on that course for mature applicants and for students coming through the vocational QQI level 5 and level 6 route. So that always adds a great diversity to our groups, you know, really a nice mix of experience, and it really helps. What I would like to plug shamelessly actually is a new master's that we're starting in September, and it's a Master's of Education in Early Childhood Education. So it's a master's that's going to be over 2 years, part-time over 2 years. Some of it will be online, some of it will be face-to-face. We'll have to see how we figure all that out. But it's a really interesting master's, because it's going to go very deep in terms of pedagogy. So if you're really interested in understanding how children learn, why they learn the way they do, and how we can support that learning from a pedagogical point of view, that would be a good master's. And out of that master's, or alongside that master's, myself and a colleague, Aisling, we've just finished developing and delivering a standalone module, a master's 10 credits module in mentoring and leading for professional practice. So we've just finished working with a group of 24 early childhood educators, primary teachers and post-primary teachers, looking at the whole notion of mentoring and the difference that makes. I'm really interested in that, because a bit like we were talking about, Anya, before we started the interview, for students going out on placement, often the biggest factor that influences that experience is the quality of the mentoring that they get on site. It makes such a huge difference. And therefore, we think that if we deliver this module, that maybe it will attract people who already have a degree but want to lift their own mentoring skills in working with students, but working with their own staff maybe as well.
Yes.
So that's kind of where we're at in DCU. I do know we've stiff competition because you've great courses in other parts of the country as well, but I suppose, look, I'm biased. We think we're great.
Okay, so that just in relation to placement, just to lead into the next question, can you explain how placement works for students in DCU and what are the benefits for the student and the service that take on students for student placement?
Well, firstly to say, Anya, we are always extremely grateful to work in partnership with any setting. I always kind of think for students going on placement, I have always thought that opening up your door to welcome in a student is a bit like opening up your hall door and bringing a stranger in. Because when that student comes in, they see you on all your good days, but they see you on your not so good days. We all have those days. Nobody is perfect 100% of the time. And so that relationship that we build with the settings and the students build with the settings is hugely important. And I'll start off by saying we are very grateful for partnerships with people like yourself, Anya, and Irene in Roscommon CCC, but equally in early childhood settings. So the programme, Emily has just gone through one programme structure in terms of placement, but we're changing it for next year. So from next year, our students will be undertaking 4 days a week placement in semester 2. So that means maybe from January until the end of April, beginning of May, our students will be out for 4 days per week. Okay. And unlike other years when we were very Dublin centric, in the coming year, we're supporting students to engage locally. So I think hopefully, and fingers crossed, there'll be some of our students with your people looking for places and placements in Roscommon. So the placement is focused then on the 4 day week. The students go out, they engage with the setting, they have a whole range of tasks, and depending on what year they're in, they have a particular focus. So first year, it's very much a focus on getting to know the children, following interests, emergent curriculum. Year 2, we focus a lot on things like intentionality. And that's not a word that's easily used in early childhood because intentional teaching is often seen as something that's very structured and didactic. But actually, intentional teaching is about knowing why you're doing what you're doing with the children. Year 3, there's a great focus on diversity and working with parents. And in year 4, and this is a nice thing, and Emily might speak to this as well, year 4 allows the students really choose their own placement. And they do that really to follow their heart, their interests, and maybe even to help them with their career. So we allow students in 4th year go to a whole range of placement settings. They may go to an early childhood setting. They may go into a primary school because maybe that's where they want to head. They can also go into we call policy, but policy is a big catch-all phrase for maybe settings like yourselves where students are not working directly with children, but that they can grow their knowledge in relation to early childhood. So we have a number of students in places like the county city childcare committees because we understand and appreciate the wonderful work that's been done through the committees. So that's the kind of the range and the timing of placement for us. And I do think the students love placement. There is no two ways about it. Our students last year were heartbroken because they weren't getting out. So, and when they're out there, it's a really nice opportunity for them to. It's a bit of a cliche, but it's true. Link in their theory with practice.
Yeah.
Stuff they're learning in the books. What does that mean? What does that really mean when I go into a setting? And they missed that terribly last year, which is such a shame. But life is life, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we value. I mean, 25% of our overall course is placement. Mm-hmm. So we highly value it. And unlike some colleges do not send their first years out on placement, we do. We reckon that very early on, the students need to know if this is something for them. You don't want to waste their 4 years or our 4 years for the setting
Yeah.
time. So I think all in all, we've a very flexible placement programme. It's very much focused from an assessment point of view on, I suppose, on practice, on continual assessment. And so that's, I suppose, in a nutshell, Anya, I could talk all day about it, but I think in a nutshell, that's
Yes.
probably our programme.
Brilliant. Perfect. Okay, so we'll move on to Emily, and Emily has been with us here in Roscommon County Childcare Committee the last few months. She's been working with us. She's been on placement. So Emily, I'll just jump straight into it. So can you give me a quick overview of your college journey and why you chose to complete the course that you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, so I completed my Leaving Cert in Newbridge College and I applied to DCU for the BC course through the CAO. I'd visited the university tons of times with Newbridge College as a secondary student, and I knew regardless of what I'd done, I wanted to go to DCU because it was fabulous campus, fabulous courses. So from there then, afterwards, I suppose Dublin, I'm from Kildare myself, so Dublin is commutable for me. Means I didn't have to, I suppose, spend money on rent, things like that, and I was able to still live at home, bit of a home bird, and I could keep my part-time job as well, so that was pretty important. So then I suppose to get into the course then, I've always been interested in children's education. I had originally looked at things like primary teaching, social studies, and then during my career guidance in school, my career guidance counsellor pointed me towards the BC course in DCU and said this is definitely something that you could look at. It was level 8, you know, if you worked hard you could get it, and I did. So I decided on the early years course in DCU. And then I suppose then I believe that any experience at that age, that I suppose working with children and their early experiences, that they have lifelong effects on, I suppose, whether they be positive or negative effects, those experiences that children may carry on into their adulthood. And then after that, I knew that at some stage I would want to travel, and this degree is recognised worldwide, and it's something that I can travel with. I will definitely be coming back to Ireland with it, but just to get the travelling out my system, the degree supported that. And then maybe down the line I might like to become self-employed. I might have a bit of an itch to open up my own service, and I think I've definitely been supported along the way with DCU, so I'll definitely have the capacity to do that if I keep working hard. And then I suppose the opportunity to have a positive impact on children from all communities and backgrounds, which we've gotten to experience through the course as well.
Brilliant, brilliant. And Emily, what would you say is your favourite area to study?
My favourite area to study on the course is definitely the psychology module. So we've done a number of psychology modules throughout the course, and I enjoyed this piece because I suppose it gave us, like the students, the tools to understand children's behaviour, but not only understand it, but to understand why they behave under certain situations, things like that. So things like the impacts their environments and their experiences have on their behaviour. And it just to have that kind of, it was a bit of extra background that you're always thinking about it when you go out on placement. So you might look and think when you're doing your observations, you understand them a bit more on a bit of a deeper level. And then we had a couple of modules surrounding policy. So I think I enjoyed these because the policy piece, I think it's important to be consistent and have a high standard of policies and procedures in the sector, across the sector, because I know DCU have kind of instilled this in us as well across the course. The higher standards, it's going to kind of, I suppose, be more, it will provide more of a cohesive approach to ECCE, which in turn will help to encourage more people into the sector to pursue a career, a profession in the sector, and overall then just to provide, more education, and then that will enhance children's learning outcomes and learning experiences.
Brilliant, perfect. Okay, so just going back to the placement aspect of things, do you feel that placement in the early learning care sector was worthwhile or beneficial?
Placement is definitely worthwhile. As Marlene said, it gives us the opportunity to put theory and learning into practice. We can explore it further for ourselves. when I suppose in your modules you're kind of being encouraged to think about your own pedagogical approaches and things like that. So getting out onto placement, it gives you the opportunity to kind of think, that works, that doesn't work, that might not work for me, how can I enhance this, how might I make it better? And you're getting to link in with educators who are experienced as well, and you can kind of pull different ideas then from them, and you're building upon your own ideas and your own pedagogies. So the placement at the same time, it allows us, as I said, to put theory to practice, and it allows us to work with children and families from diverse backgrounds as well. So we've definitely had fabulous opportunities throughout the course on various placements. Definitely worthwhile.
Brilliant, perfect. Okay, so then the big question: what have you learned on placement with us here in Roscommon County Childcare Committee?
First of all, again, as Marlene said, just thanks so much for having me. It was such a stress off my mind. Fourth year is fairly intense as it is your final year. You're thinking about dissertations and things like that. So to kind of know that was there, it was something that we didn't have to worry about. It was fantastic. So as just for I was on placement with the throughout the pandemic, throughout lockdowns, so I've seen how flexible Roscommon County Childcare can be, and I know that you've continued to deliver your services to the sector both online and remotely, and you facilitated myself remotely as well, which was a huge stress off my mind. I've learned to interact with community groups, so like through our project with the parent toddler groups, that was a fantastic experience, and to engage with these parents and children through our weekly online activities. And I suppose I've become more confident in myself in things like designing and implementing things like the different activities and the different things that we carried out throughout the placement. So things like skills in delivering remotely have definitely increased through Zoom and our social media, emails, things like that. And even the little things that go on in the background that I might not have realised until I came on placement with yourselves, like making the posters and making the flyers and advertising the events and things like that. So that all goes on in the background, and I definitely have more of an understanding and more of a respect for the hard work that goes on in the background. So definitely, I just feel like I'm coming out with more of an informed understanding of the work that county childcare committees carry out.
Brilliant, and we'd all like to thank you for your work with us during your placement. And just finally, your last question then is: are you looking forward to starting your career in the ELC sector?
I am definitely. I'm looking at my options and the opportunities at the moment. So it's definitely a little bit daunting. I've been having some chats with Marlene and our other groups. So we're all kind of heading out into the big bad world. But I think I'm hoping to get employment where I can put the substantial learning and experiences that DCU have definitely, and our placements as well, have given us. So I've gained a lot over the last 4 years, I think. So I'm just excited to put it into practice and see if I can do it some justice.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, so just to bring Marlene back again, just the final question I'm going to ask the both ye. I'll go with Marlene first. If you had a one-to-one meeting with the Minister for Children and he was going to grant you one request, what would it be?
I think, Anya, of course, to pick out one. I think I would like to see paying conditions structured and improved within the sector, whether that's through pay scales. I'd like that system bedded in so that decent wages, respectful wages and conditions could be there for everybody in the sector, because that is part of the reason retention is a hard job in lots of services. So I think that is the main thing I would want. And equally a little prod, I would like some sort of initiative that helps people begin to understand and value early childhood. I think we need to lift the status of early childhood. It's happening, but that's something else that needs to move along.
Brilliant, perfect. And Emily, as a student, what would your request be?
As a student, I think when I was thinking about this question, I had my leadership and management lecturer on my shoulder in my ear kind of telling me. So I'd like to see, as Marlene said, think the overall terms and conditions of employment addressed, most importantly, the wage levels. So I feel that it's the key to reducing the turnover of staff, as Marlene said, in the sector, and it's key to achieving the high level of qualification that the First Five initiative is, I suppose, lobbying for. I understand that the government's capacity to improve the terms and conditions of employment are limited by the fact that the state aren't the employer, but rather that the services are owned by combinations of private and community-based owners. So in the absence of the government being able to influence working conditions, I think the Minister of Children and Youth Affairs had called for the ELC sector to pressure a sectoral order from the Labour Court. So I think with the cooperation of the DCUIA, I think this should be pursued as a priority. It'll keep people in the sector, it will attract new people into the sector, it will increase the level of education, all those important things, but it'll greatly, I think, influence and benefit the professionalisation of the sector, which again in turn will go towards that high quality service for children and families, which is, I think, the most important thing.
Brilliant. Brilliant, guys. Thank you so much for taking some time out to speak to me. As you know, this interview will be going up online for Recruitment Week from the 26th of April to the 2nd of May. It's Roscommon CCC Recruitment Week, and I'd like to thank you both for taking the time out. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sonia.
Thank you.
See you then. Bye.
See ya. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.